Welcome to Navigating Hope, your compass to health empowerment. I'm Dr. Jaime Hope, steering you through healthcare, overcoming overwhelm, personal goals, and emergencies. We'll navigate the healthcare maze with actionable insights and real-world advice, unlocking the secrets to a healthier, more vibrant life. Join us to take control of your well-being and make informed decisions for your health and your future. Stay with us as we unravel the mysteries of medicine, wellness, and life's unforeseen challenges, helping you bypass the ER with a dose of knowledge. Stay tuned till the end of the episode with a recap of your actionable insights and a free gift. Let's chart a course to your well-being together. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Navigating Hope. And I am so excited to be here today with Marc Nakisher. Now, listeners, you're used to me bringing on physicians and medical professionals. And if you look at his street cred, you're going to wonder, why are we talking to a lawyer? Well, don't worry, I'm not in trouble and neither are you. It turns out that our friendly lawyers guide us through the process of making sure we can navigate the healthcare system when a family member becomes ill or elderly. So everything can be seamless in terms of their care, the finances, and all the things that go along with that. So let me tell you a little bit about Marc. He is a senior partner at the Nakisher Law Firm, and he concentrates his practice in estate planning. So we're going to learn what that is and why it's relevant. So really specializing in helping clients balance their planning goals with their desire to minimize gift and estate taxes. So big fan of decreasing taxes. What I like about Marc is he has been twice named one of Michigan's super lawyer rising stars. He received his BA from Michigan State University, go green, and his JD from the John Marshall Law School. He's admitted to practice law in both Michigan and Illinois. Marc is an avid marathon runner, a triathlete, and is married with 3 wonderful children. Marc, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
This is exciting. We were just before we started, we were talking about kids and camp, and my son's in camp, and your kids have all done that. So that was a lot of fun.
It's awesome. Yeah, camp's the best.
All right, so let's dive into this. So I want to make sure that people understand what estate planning even is. It's not just about the money, and it doesn't apply to only like people who are billionaires. This is something that applies to all of us, right?
Yeah, that's right, Jamie. So what I would say, and where I would like to start, is with what I call the bare bones of estate planning. And that is what everyone needs. And those are powers of attorney. So first and foremost, a medical power of attorney. In Michigan, we call it a patient advocate designation. People know it as a living will, an advance directive, a healthcare power of attorney. And essentially, you're naming someone to make a medical decision for you if you can't speak for yourself. So it's incredibly important to have this in place so that, again, if you get sick, if you get in an accident, there's someone who can speak for you and make those important decisions. The other important piece of this, and you know this, and people in the medical profession know it so well, is HIPAA. So the other piece of medical is having a HIPAA medical release. And what we do is we provide a list of people in any order who can get information. If you get sick, if you get in an accident, your kids, your family, whoever's on the list can show up and say, tell me what's going on, and they will tell them. So this is so incredibly important to be able to have in place. This is something, and I always tell people, I have this for my own parents, and I keep it in my car. Because if something happens and I'm the first guy, at the hospital, they'll tell me what's going on, no questions asked. So,
and I think that's really key, Marc, because people think that we only need those forms for our elderly parents or something like that. But working as an ER doc now for nearly 2 decades, I know at any time I could be in a crash. That's why I don't text and drive or cut people off. So tell me how it's useful for all age ranges.
So it's so interesting you say that. So we talked about our kids and camp, and I have 3 kids. I have 2 older kids, both over the age of 18. When they turned 18, the very first thing I did was draft these documents for them. Because for our children, you think of them, well, it's my kid. They'll tell me everything, but they won't, because your kid's over 18. And whether you like it or not, they're an adult. They're
Yep.
our kids. We don't think they're adults when they're 18 years old, but they are. They are adults. So it is so important to have these in place, not only for our elderly parents, but for our children and for ourselves, because things can happen at any age. And I've had friends who had a kid up at school in East Lansing, got sick, and they were able to call the hospital and get information immediately. Without it, they could or would have been denied any information about their child. So it's so important,
Absolutely.
all ages.
And having that also helps avoid conflicts, because I see this happen in the emergency department
Yeah.
fairly frequently. So family member, say a person comes in either ill or in a trauma, and one family member comes in and says, okay, do this, because the patient is now no longer able to make that decision, right? So a family member comes in, well, then you have another family member coming in saying the exact opposite. So I'm the doctor sitting there trying to do the right thing, trying to do the best thing, and I have two people arguing. I've had literally people arguing and yelling at each other over top of the patient bed. So how can we please prevent that?
Right. So having these documents in place avoids that. So you have one voice. And it's interesting because some people say, well, can my kids do it together? And the answer I say is no, the kids can't do it together. Because if the kids disagree, there's only one person who suffers, and that's the parent. So we have one person who's in charge. Now we have backup for those people. So we have someone named, and just in case they can't do it for whatever reason, there's a backup. Well, they serve consecutively in the order they appear. So we have multiple people who will serve to make those decisions, speak for you again if you can't speak for yourself. So this is so important. Again, the bare bones, it's like the must-have for every person, no matter what age.
And this doesn't come into place if you can speak for yourself, right? If I have designated my husband, he can't just come in and while I'm standing here and say, no, she has to do this. I'm like, hello, I can hear you.
Right. So, and I always tell people, I say, if you can tell a doctor what you want or don't want, they don't care what anybody else says. But if you can't, you need to have that person named to speak for you. It's so important. So when we do this, the medical decision making does have an order to it. So you would probably have your spouse number one, and then you have a backup or two just in case your spouse couldn't do it. On a HIPAA release, we typically just have a list of people in any order who can get information. And you know this, pre-HIPAA, I could have walked into the hospital and said, oh, my friend Jamie's here. What's going on? They would have said, oh, Jamie, yeah, she's getting this medication. We did this. They tell me everything. And now they won't do that. They won't even tell me if Jamie is a patient in that hospital.
Correct.
Unless you have the proper documentation. And that's why this is such an important part of having an estate plan.
And those rules are in place for a reason, because we do want to protect people's confidentiality. We don't want people inappropriately accessing information. So designating those, and I assume that you guide your clients. So say, in my case, I'm married, but for instance, say I'm not. And so I want to choose my bestie to be my person. I assume you guide me to have a conversation with bestie about what I would like and what my values are were something to happen to me before I officially sign my decision-making over to them.
Right. So it's very important to have a conversation with the person you're designating. However, you also are in charge of making those decisions on your own. So within the document, you have the ability to say whether it's okay to withhold or withdraw treatment that would allow you to die. Is it okay to pull the plug? Or is it okay to sign a DNR, do not resuscitate, on my behalf? Or do I want to be an organ donor? Things like that. So those are all
go organ donors. We appreciate that. My nephew was a recipient of a heart. Bless all the people who are willing to do that. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. And so in other words, the person you're naming is the spokesperson. You've already made these decisions and they're just following your wishes. So many times it's easier for an adult child, if there's an elderly parent or someone, to make those decisions because they know it's not them making the decision. It's a decision that their parent has already made and they are just following their wishes. So that's an important piece of it as well.
Well, that's good to know. So myself as a patient signing this form, I'm not just giving them blanket power. I'm saying from my values, I would choose, this level of sustaining life care. If it is found that it's a non-survivable injury or brain death or, become, trach and peg dependent, I would like to be an organ donor. So I can actually lay out some specifics that would guide their decision making.
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting. So when it comes to these documents, we've gotten a way of being really specific on these documents.
Okay, well, that makes sense because it's hard to be too specific.
Right. The problem would be, if the one thing that happened to you wasn't on the list.
Of course.
So I said, but that's what they meant. And they say, sorry, it's not on the list. So we do sort of draft in generalities, but on the other hand, that's why it's important to have a conversation with the person named.
Yes. Well, and that's why it's important to have a conversation with a lawyer who specializes in this.
Yeah.
So, because I wouldn't know what level of specificity, like what floor in the hospital do I want to be in? I'm sure the hospital is not interested, in my opinion, on that. But just kind of the broader picture of what my values would be around wanting to be an organ donor and this and that.
Right. Yeah. So that is like, to me, and I always say, the money will work itself out eventually, but the medical is the most important. And to me, kind of that HIPAA release, really, of all the documents that we draft, is maybe the simplest, but maybe the most important document because you need it in a crisis.
Yes.
And when there's a crisis, you want to be able to have everything you need to get all the information immediately. And if you don't have it, as we just sort of said, you may not get the information, and that can be devastating.
So the difference in having it ready even before a crisis versus once you're in crisis, trying to kind of put all these pieces together with some duct tape, that's got to be a lot harder.
It's funny, on the HIPAA release, when our clients come in, we make copies and with specific instructions to give these to your family, the people named. They need to have it at their house because if it's buried in your house somewhere, it doesn't help them. Again, that's why I have my parents in my car. My clients, I give them the same advice. Put it in your car or put it somewhere in your house where you know where it is and you can grab it if something happens. Because again, if it's at mom's house under a stack of papers, it's just not going to work. No one's going to be able to access it to help you. So accessibility is a really important part of it, and letting people know about it is important as well.
That's excellent. And for us in those crisis situations in the ER and for other medical professionals, when people come in without paperwork, we have to make assumptions on their behalf. And I would rather have the most information about the patient and know who I can talk to so I can get much better recommendations on their behalf.
Yeah. I mean, you want to cover your back, rightfully so. All physicians do. And having this documentation for you is a no-brainer. You take and you say, great, what do you need to know? What can I tell you? So it makes everyone's life easier. Yours, the patients, their families. So let's kind of talk about the flip side of this, okay?
Yeah.
So real quick, I said there's the bare bones. So I said one was medical decision-making, one is medical information, and another one is a durable power of attorney for finances, a POA, power of attorney. Right.
All right.
So again, that is like if you get sick, you name someone to help you with your finances, bill pay, things like that. Here's the flip side of that. There's two words I'm going to say. Maybe you've heard of them before: guardianship and conservatorship. Okay, so
a little bit, and so we'll have to take the Britney Spears out of this.
So and that's kind of it. Yeah. So guardianship is from the root guard, to protect, for medical, and conservative from the root conserve, for finances. Those two things are a very long and expensive process in the probate court. So another part of what we do is we go to probate court. We're lawyers. We do go to court sometimes.
You love that, right?
We have probate court. So guardianship and conservatorship is probate while you're alive. It's probate during your life. And it can be completely avoided by drafting these powers of attorney. The documents I just said: medical power of attorney, medical information, and a durable power of attorney for finances. That will avoid your family going through the probate process to help you while you're alive.
And so that probate process, we're talking by setting this up, you are saving us time and money, right? Because that's what the probate costs: a lot of time and a lot of money. And so by having this set up in advance, now you're not spending or wasting some of that time and money. Did I understand that right? So
imagine, if something happens to a parent, a doctor says, well, you need to be named guardian and conservator for your mom or for your dad. It doesn't happen overnight, right? This is weeks of a process through the court system where you have to go before a judge, and then the court appoints a court-appointed lawyer to go and interview the patient and the family. And it's a huge process that you have to go through to make this happen. In extreme circumstances, if someone is in an accident and they don't have these documents, we have to file for an emergency guardianship and conservatorship to make it happen immediately. But those are only granted under extreme circumstances. So it's not like, well, they're really sick, they need help. The court's not going to like that. And they're going to make you just kind of go through their standard process. This, again, is all avoided with a little bit of planning in advance and with a lawyer who can make sure it's done the right way.
Right. In a lot of ways, this is like preventative medicine. Instead of trying to fix a problem when it's fully like at its worst, it's what can we do to stop that from happening? So this doesn't sound overly complicated or intimidating at all, honestly.
No, it's not. I mean, it's a simple process. Sometimes the hardest part is finding the right people to put in these positions. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, hey, I have 3 kids. I'll put my kids on there, or I'll put them on in this order. But sometimes people don't have an extended family or a friend network. So it can be difficult finding people occasionally to put in these positions. But you have to sort of, I always say, plan for where you are now. We can't predict the future. We don't know where our lives are going to go, but where you are now, because these documents are always revocable. You can change them whenever you want. So if life changes or people come in and out of your lives, you can make those changes to your documents.
Yeah, I mean, as things change, what if your spouse becomes your ex-spouse? You might not want them making choices for you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right. So it can be a fluid process that can change. That's really reassuring.
Yep. So I wanted to sort of also go into and talk a little bit more about estate planning and a few other things. So we have the bare bones, those powers of attorney that we have in place. And then, so the next thing that maybe you would do is put a will in place. Okay. And everyone kind of knows what a will is. You name who's in charge when you die and who gets the money. Every will goes through probate court. You have to pay the court costs, the filing fees, the attorney fees. You have to pay a percentage of your money to the court. It's called an inventory fee. Mm-hmm. And it's also a public record. So anyone can go read your will and see how much money you had, who was in charge, who got the money, and everything else. It's public. I read Aretha Franklin's will. Why? Because it's public. Anyone can.
Okay, I did not know that. So is not ideal. Every will
is public, and it can be read. It's a public record that your next door neighbor, long lost cousin, can go to the court and read your will and know everything about your affairs after you passed away.
Yikes.
And there's plenty of people who say, well, I'm dead, I don't care. And that's okay. Wills work. On the flip side, a lot of people like having a revocable living trust. So a revocable living trust, a couple of things. Number one, it avoids probate court. We skip that probate process. We don't pay the court costs, the lawyer's fees. We don't pay the inventory fee to the court. We don't do any of those things. And it's private. People like it. So the only people who can read your trust are the people named in the document. And that's it. So it's never recorded in any city or county office. So people like probate avoidance, and they like keeping things private. So those are kind of like the big planning techniques, very common. People used to think trusts were for just rich people. I always say, like, if you own a house, if you got a couple bucks in the bank, it's worth having a trust in place to protect your assets.
Right, because probate would be delighted to take a piece of that, right?
Sure.
Of whatever you have. It doesn't matter how big your pie is. They'll be delighted to take a piece of that if you don't have these documents in place.
Yeah. So, when it comes to planning, you put these things in place, and I kind of joke around with my clients and say, hey, we're going to put this together, and it means you will forever, right? You're never going to need it. It's like life insurance. You buy it so you don't need it. But when it comes into play, it's incredibly useful for the people helping you. And why do we do this anyway? Why do we draft powers of attorney, and why do we do wills and trust? You do it so you have the peace of mind to know that it's done, but you do it to make it as easy as possible on the people helping you if you get sick or when you die, right?
Yeah.
So that's the key. You're doing it for your kids. You're doing it for your family. Whoever's going to be that person or those people to help you, you're doing it for them.
Yeah. Well, and that's fantastic. And I assume there's some nuances or differences. Like, I have 2 children that are under 18. So really, essentially, if my husband, heaven forbid, knock on wood, something happens to both of us at the same time, the people who get our children will get or everything else, essentially, versus once they are adults and how to divide that up. So are there some?
Well, it's interesting. So, Jamie, guardianship is a huge part of planning. And I do find with younger couples who have smaller children, that's the biggest hurdle, is deciding, the husband and wife agreeing who gets the kids. But what I would say is, well, maybe it's easier for some people. Some people, it's a difficult decision. But what I would say is do it, because if you don't do it, and again, God forbid something happens, the first person who shows up in the probate court may be the one who gets your kids, and it may not be the person or the people you want. Okay. So you should be in control of that decision and put a list of people to be able to step in if you pass away without leaving no spouse and minor children. It's incredibly important. Such a big part of the plan.
Now, for family members, particularly those who have a genetic propensity to something like dementia. So say, for example, if that were the case in my family and my parents, before they start really experiencing a lot of signs where they are going to be at higher risk to fall victim to scams, to undue influence and stuff, you'd want to have these in place. They'd want them for themselves, so they would know how we, as their adult children, the designate to behave as that changes for them.
Right. So, Jamie, capacity is such a big part of having a plan. We talk about the window, and a plan has to be put in place while the window's open. If the window closes, meaning you no longer have capacity, and the legal term we say is to understand the objects of your bounty, who your family is, how much money you have, who you want to be in control of those things. If you can't understand that, then you can't draft an estate plan. Then you're stuck. Then you're stuck with maybe an old plan that you had before, I drafted a will before I went to the Army,
Right.
You're stuck with it, right? Or you're stuck with nothing at all. And we call that dying intestate. And that means the state of Michigan, in this case, has an estate plan in place for you. And again, it may not be what you want. So the law does prescribe what happens if you pass away without a will. So again, not what most people want. And I will say too, just kind of going back to minor children, because we've talked about our kids a little bit. When you have minor children and you leave them money, we typically like to leave them money in trust under the supervision of someone we trust. And what I like to do is I like to stagger the distributions. Mm-hmm. Meaning, for example, like what I did for my own kids. I said, if something happened to my wife and I, the money is held in trust for my kids. Before they're 25, the person in charge can give them money for whatever they need it for. We say their health, education, maintenance, and support. Then when they turn 25, we break off a piece and we give it to them. At 30, we give them a little bit more. And at 35, we give them whatever's left. We call this, again, staggering the distribution. So you're not dumping a big pot of money on some 18-year-old's lap.
Oh, God, that would be the worst case
scenario. Or the most fun they've ever had, right? They're going to buy a car and throw a party. Who knows?
For a hot minute, and then it's gone, and then,
Right. So these are protections that we put in place for our minor children. And then again, for the adult children whose parents are getting older, sometimes what we do is we put kids in charge along with mom and dad, or mom or dad, to be able to oversee their finances, help them, make sure they're not getting scammed, make sure that people aren't taking advantage of them, that they can have oversight over their parents' assets. They don't own their parents' assets, but they can control them for the benefit of their parents, right? So it's a great thing to have in place.
Well, and I've absolutely seen that. So even with friends that their parents are showing those signs of dementia, they don't find out for a few months that they haven't been making the mortgage payment. It's not that they don't have the money, it just slipped their mind. But then all of a sudden they get a call from the bank, hey, your mom is withdrawing quite a bit of cash, which is out of character. We want to make sure she's okay. And if she hadn't set that up in place, she would have no idea that her mom was falling for one of those FBI or IRS scams. The IRS does not call you. The IRS does not request payment in Target gift cards. But because of the memory loss, and those criminals know how to play this. So she was falling for it in real time. And if there were nothing in place, my friend would have been powerless to watch her mom just ruin all her finances.
Yeah. If there's a possibility of something like that happening, My recommendation typically is to limit the access that the parent has to money, or have an account that has no overdraft protection, right? So you take a few $1,000s and you put it in an account because you don't want to remove the independence from those parents.
Yeah, the
You want to,
independence, the dignity, that's
right,
so key. That's not what we want to take away.
right. We want to be able to make sure that they can maintain that independence without the possibility of financially harming themselves. So we put these, different roadblocks in place so that they can't be taken advantage of.
Fantastic. It's like bumpers in a bowling game where they put the bumpers in the gutters. Like, it's not going to guarantee you're going to score straight, but at least it's going to keep you from falling off.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're making great progress here, Marc. I really feel like I'm understanding all the different things, I would need for myself, for my parents and loved ones. What else in terms of estate planning would we need to know?
So I also wanted to talk to you about, and this is a very common phone call that we get at our office, when people's needs increase and maybe they can no longer stay in the home, or maybe they've had they have dementia and they can no longer live at home and they need long-term care. So this is elder law, and we do practice elder law at our office as well, and we guide people through the process of making sure that they can get the care that they need without running their money down to zero.
Yes,
So,
that's something I hear from patients or family members in the emergency department in a hospital setting. They said we have to just essentially bankrupt them in order to get access to care. They're already concerned about the medical part, right? But now they're also worried about that. So teach us about that.
yeah, so so Medicare is one thing. You turn 65, doesn't matter if you're Bill Gates or the guy down the street, you get Medicare. Medicaid is much different. Medicaid is akin to welfare. You have to meet income and asset requirements in order to qualify. So for Medicare, that's what people are talking about, where I have to spend my money down to zero, then I can qualify for Medicaid, and then have benefits put in place to be able to stay in a long-term care facility without paying. What we like to do is we do Medicaid planning, and we shelter assets, we protect assets so that there's a pot of money that would be available for mom and dad to supplement what they're not receiving from their government assistance. It's a very complicated process, and it's not an easy thing to do. And I would never recommend anyone doing it on their own. You absolutely need to have the help of a lawyer to go through this process. But it is possible, number one, to shelter assets, to not spend yourself down to zero and still qualify for benefits. And number two, here's the big one, Jamie, the house. I can't, once a week, I get a phone call. Hey, Marc, can the nursing home take my house? And here's the deal. I'm going to tell you what the answer is. So the answer was, and still is, while you're alive, a nursing home cannot take your house. It's protected. Okay? Because if you go to a nursing home, there's a presumption that you can get better and you need to go home. So you got to have a place to live, right? So they cannot take your house while you're alive. Now, what the law used to say is when you die, the kids can get all of the equity in your home. That law changed. Ooh. Now the law says the nursing home can grab the equity out of your house to repay themselves for the care they provided. Unless, Jamie, you got a good lawyer. Right. That's what they're doing, because that can be avoided. That can very easily be avoided. So we had a client who called, the mom passed away. She'd been in a nursing home, did not plan. And the nursing home took the entire home and all of its equity after mom died.
So then the kids had nothing.
Nothing. So if they had called us prior to her passing, we could have corrected this and made sure that the home went to the kids and not the nursing home. We were able to bypass that. Okay. But a lot of people don't know about it, and they don't know the planning exists. So the important thing is making people aware that these techniques are available. And I love it. People sometimes say, Marc, is that legal? Of course.
You're a lawyer, obviously.
It's absolutely legal. I promise.
All you do. Right.
It's legal.
Oh, so,
yeah, that's why it's so important. It's so important to, if there's a diagnosis, if there is, because when's the time to plan, right? The time to plan is if there's a diagnosis. If there's something in the future that is pending, you have to make that. If you're bleeding money And the average cost of a nursing home right now is between $8,000 and $12,000 per month.
Oh yeah.
Depending on the level of care that's needed, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So our job is to go in and stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding, get someone qualified for assistance, and make sure that they're in the right place and getting, of course, the care that they need.
Now, just so we all understand this, so we use the example of my folks who are just love to be volunteered for hypothetical scenarios. Right. So say I want to do this with my folks. This isn't like my secret plot to then take away their house and sell it or whatever. Like, I don't own their house or control it in any way by setting this up for them. Is that right?
Well, you may control their house. You don't own it. Okay. And if you're going to own it, you would only own it after they pass away. Right. Okay. So when people say, well, oh, that money's mine, I say that's not your money, that's your parents' money. You're a contingent beneficiary. It means it's your money contingent on your parents dying.
Right.
So when they die, then it becomes
just live longer and healthier. I don't want their money.
But hopefully, Jamie, you are in control of their house and of their assets, and you have the ability to use it for them and just for their benefit. So again, we kind of joke around and I say, well, you can use the money to go to Cancun. You just have to bring your parents with you when you go, right? So that's
fantastic. They're great.
You're getting all the great estate planning jokes today.
I know, all these are great. But that makes sense. So if there's, as you get older and people are considering doing this, it's not a secret ploy that your kids are trying to get you, take your house and take all your stuff. It is a way to protect it. So that money is being used for your care the way you see fit versus the nursing home making that grab after death.
It's interesting. You sort of said a couple things, and many times people do these plans and they're kept so secret. They're very secretive. And I'm a little bit of a believer of sharing these things with your kids while you're alive and making sure they know what's going on and they understand the plan and they know that you have this plan in place and where to find it is so important. I say, listen, there's two things your kids have to know. Number one, you have an estate plan. Number two, where to find it.
Right.
So that's another key part of it too. But sharing the information is always, I think, a smart thing to do in terms of keeping people in the loop without there being big surprises. You're not required to share it with anyone. I just think sometimes it's smart.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like we picture a very theatrical movie, like everyone comes into the room and someone's got like
reading of the will.
Reading of the will. Yeah. Right. It doesn't need to be like that.
It's funny because it's not a real thing. It doesn't exist. That's not a thing that estate planning lawyers do.
How dare movies not be accurate, Mark? This is upsetting.
There is no reading of the will. What we are required to do and what the person in charge is required to do is they are required to inform all of the people, the interested parties of the estate plan, give them a copy of the estate plan, give them an accounting of the assets. So it's interesting. We've kind of talked about the bare bones. We talked about a will. We talked about a trust. We talked about Medicaid planning. But the flip side of it also is administration. So what happens after somebody dies? Okay. So that's another part, a big part of estate planning is sort of going through the process of administering the plan after someone passes away. So, we always preach transparency. We say, listen, if they're entitled to it, give it to them. If they ask for something, give them more than what they asked for. We have no secrets, right? So that's another big part of the plan, and it's important to do that the right way as well. And I always recommend that whenever that day comes when people pass away, you meet with a lawyer and you have them help you with the process. Make sure you have the documents in place to be able to walk into a bank and pay the bills and take care of the business and sell the house, and then eventually make distributions and close it out. So that's another really big part of having a good estate plan and using an attorney the right way.
I feel like in a lot of ways, it takes a little bit of work to get these things set up, but it provides an enormous amount of relief. I mean, I would feel like, okay, I feel very comfortable if I am injured or ill, that I'm confident that decisions will be made well on my behalf, that my family will be taken care of, that my money goes to my family and not to the government, right. All of those things, that little bit of time up front, there's some time, there's some expense, but what it saves you downstream in actual money, like literal cost return on investment and time and peace of mind, to get this set up. So you give people what you do is probably like a god awful amount of paperwork, and bless you for doing that. But what you're actually selling people is time, money, and peace of mind, right?
Yeah. 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 It is so valuable in so many ways. Like you said, beyond the money and things like that, the ability to be able to create a roadmap that someone will follow, because it's not, when someone passes away, it's not the person in charge who's deciding who gets the money. It's the decedent, it's mom and dad who are making those decisions. And if anyone complains to the person in charge, they just say, don't shoot the messenger, right? I'm just following this roadmap that was created, and I was named to follow the roadmap. And that's the most important thing. And then listen, I'll tell you, here's the other really important part, and you'll love this. I'm sure you're a very organized person, is we believe in not just having the legal documents that someone has, having that in place, but also having the documentation to let the kids know where mom and dad keep important papers, the professionals that they work with, who's their tax guy, who's their home and auto insurance, their clergy, their financial advisors, their bankers, who these professionals are in their world, relatives and friends who should get a phone call if something happens to them, burial and funeral instructions. So this is a key part, making sure those last final wishes are met, or if necessary, naming the right person to follow those directions for you. So that's another really important part of it as well, having a list of all the assets that you own, the banks that you work with, so that if someone picked up your plan, they would need to know what you had, where to find it, who to call, and everything. All the legal documents are there to support all the information. So, some lawyers, they show up and they give you a stack of papers, say, here's your stuff. Well, that's not that helpful.
Oh my gosh. That would be
you gotta put a bow on it.
Yes.
Yeah. You got to put a bow on it, and you have to really make it complete. So we're big believers in having a complete plan that lays it out on a silver platter for anyone, as easy as it can be for someone to help you. And that's so important.
And that's really key. Even just having those things. I know, a lot of my friends who are in marriages, they can, that division of labor, one person tends to handle most of the finances, which is great because then the other person can do that. I mean, my husband and I have a division of labor with certain things, like he handles giant bugs and like gross stuff, and I, do this. And then of course he loads the dishwasher wrong and I load it right. So we divide up all kinds of stuff. But in our family, I do the finances. And so he was joking once. He's like, if something happens to you, like, who do I even call? Where do we even begin? If we have an investment here, how do I get a hold of them? And we joked around about it, that fortunately I'm still worth more alive than dead, thank goodness. But yeah, we would need to know that. And it was a huge wake up call to get that stuff organized.
Right. Jamie, that's so true. So not only is it important for your kids or whoever's going to help you when you and your spouse pass away, but like you said, it can be just as important for your spouse. Yeah. Because people have roles in their marriages. And if your role isn't the finance person, how lucky would you be if, God forbid something happens and you could open up this book and say, okay, well, here's our tax guy and here's our advisor and here's all the accounts that we have. It's all there. So,
mortgage, insurance, like all of that stuff. You need to know if your partner is the one that does that primarily. You need to know.
Yeah.
So excellent. Well, Marc, is there anything else? So, as we kind of wrap this up and put a bow on it, as you said, first of all, thank you for making this so accessible. I know that lawyers love the words, and if it sounds fancy, people think it's more impressive. But what you value is that integrity, the transparency, and usability of the work that you do. So as we're putting a bow on this, is there anything else that I didn't ask, or anything else that you need us to know about this process?
I don't think so. I mean, what I would say is the important thing, I would say, meet with a lawyer and talk about the different options available and make a decision about the option that you think works best for you and your situation, and make sure it's complete. Make sure that you have everything that you need for every situation. None of these things that I've talked about from a planning standpoint should be piecemeal. This should be a complete and total plan. So it shouldn't be just, we're just going to do this or that. You should do it all. It should all be part of the plan. And then you should, move forward. I wouldn't be paralyzed by decision making for who's going to do what, because these plans, as I said before, are always revocable. You can always change them if life or things happen, or if you just change your mind, change your documents. It's that simple. When we change, redraft the whole thing. So don't think of it as, oh my gosh, I have to go through that process all over again. We amend. So place the part that you want to change, and we don't rewrite the whole plan in most situations. So get it done based on where you are now, and then if you need to make a change, make a change.
Fantastic.
And get those get those 18-year-old kids, get those college kids, Jamie, those kids who are going off to school in a couple months, get them in to see a lawyer to have their powers of attorney done.
No, it's not like that. As part of an 18th birthday, welcome to adulthood. Here's some paperwork.
Right.
But I mean, right? That's kind of very on brand, but we're trying to, with my kids, I'm not raising them to be dependent forever. I'm raising future adults. And so they need to know that this is part of your responsibilities to have these paperwork and functions in place.
Yeah.
So now, so your website, first of all, is also very easy, very straightforward, very transparent. Again, the qualities that I see, and that's why we chose each other for this interview. Thinkestate.com, THINK, Thinkestate, ESTATE.com. It'll be in the show notes. So you talk about the different documents so people can learn about it. What is it? And so you're not just giving people a process, you're educating them. You're taking the time, not just give me money and I'm going to give you this unreadable stack of paperwork, but you want your clients to understand it has to be a right fit. I look at this a lot like medicine. You need to understand your tests, your diagnosis. And I have the affinity for what you personally do because of the way that you do it.
Yeah, so it's funny, Jamie, so much so, we've been drafting these documents. Our firm's been around for over 30 years. And we would always get these phone calls and it would say, well, Mark, where does it say who's in charge? And where does it say who gets the money? And eventually I just said, this is enough. We draft a summary of these big old plans. So we have a big, it's an impressive estate plan, but I always will draft 5-6 pages summarizing what this whole thing says in plain English so that if you're not sure, you can read 5 pages and you can know exactly what's going on. And then I got to make a change. I'm going to call Mark. Or you say, it's exactly what I thought. We're good to go. So I'm a big believer in having things be accessible, understandable, plain English as much as possible, because lawyers do like to use big words.
You do. You love your words. Listen, in medicine, we're always throwing Latin at people. So we're guilty of the same thing.
Right. So yeah, I think that's important too.
All right. So now you have a license in 2 states, so Michigan and Illinois. What if somebody is listening to this in California and wants to work with you? Are you able to do that? How does that look?
Yeah, now I draft documents. So again, Michigan, Illinois, the 2 states I'm licensed in. Anyone listening can always use me as a resource if they're in another state. I have a network of lawyers all over the country who I can refer to. So I'm happy to be.
Like attracts like. You're going to refer to people if they're not in your states that have that kind of similar concept of the integrity and the transparency and stuff.
Yeah. So we like to be a resource for anything estate planning related or otherwise, because we, again, have a great network of lawyers who help us and help our clients with a multitude of things because, we specialize like doctors. There isn't a jack of trade lawyer who does everything.
That'd be kind of scary, honestly.
It would be scary, right?
I specialize in emergency medicine. You do not want me performing your cardiothoracic surgery.
Right.
It's not going to go. I'll do my bestest. I will, but it's not going to go well.
You don't want me doing your divorce or your personal injury lawsuit. It's just not what I do, right? Yeah. So it's funny. I will say we look at other attorneys' documents all the time. People bring it in. Oh, this is the guy died or he retired or, will you take a look?
Be honest, is that exasperating?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm sure you can anyone listening can relate this to their own profession. But I've been doing this long enough. I can look at a trust for 2 minutes and I can tell you whether an estate planning lawyer drafted it or whether some guy who said, oh yeah, I can put that together for you, whether, someone who wasn't an estate planning attorney did it. It's so relevant so quickly that, like what most people do for a living. If you know what you're doing, you know what you're doing, So it's important to have your plan looked at. Old plans, I would have them looked at and reviewed, make sure it says what you want it to say. Those are always important things. Keeping it current is always important as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Marc Nakisher, thank you again. You made the legal system seem friendly, which is a feat, but truly how it can be leveraged to work for us and help us and guide us and uplift us. So this was a very informative conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much for having me. This was so fun. I love it.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to chatting again soon. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you for tuning into Navigating Hope with me, Dr. Jaime Hope. It has been an honor to navigate the realms of health and wellness with you today. Remember, in the journey toward a healthier life, knowledge is your compass. If you enjoyed our time together, please share, like, and subscribe to Navigating Hope. Join us next week where we'll continue to empower your health journey, arming you with the wisdom to navigate life's challenges and keep the emergency room in your rearview mirror.